A warning to citizens of Ontario and Canada. Bill 67, which purports to be nothing but an anti-racist bill, is in fact the most pernicious and dangerous piece of legislation that any Canadian government has attempted to put forward.
Are you f***ing me? Do you know what the Indian Act of Canada is, Jordan Peterson? Holy f***, that's still the law of the land. Like, we have codified in our constitution that Indigenous people are a form of property. What are you talking about? This is the most insidious bill in Canadian history. Without a hint of sarcasm. Like, holy shit. I have a new announcement for you all. Jordan Peterson's crusade. Guess what, everybody? Jordan Peterson has a new cause. He's ready to destroy the evils in Canada of CRT, postmodern neo-Marxist.
Hello, everyone. A few years ago, 2016, in the fall, to be precise, that I recorded a video alerting people to what I saw as the dangers of a bill C-16 that I regarded as an attempt to make compelled speech mandatory in Canada.
You lied. You lied. You lied. Because that's not what it was about. It wasn't about that at all. It was about including protections for gender in the more broader protections that are already offered in Canada towards people who are part of marginalized communities. That includes things like hate speech. That includes other things as well, such as you cannot commit genocide against a particular group based on these protections. That's all it was. No one, and I repeat, no one in Canada has gone to jail for compelled speech. No one has been fired for things outside of the usual hate speech and stuff of that nature. But you lied. You lied, and it's what made your career is the super fucked up thing. This is what made Jordan Peterson. Before this, he apparently, and just like, have you all seen that really funny tweet where someone's like, before that bill, all I knew about Jordan Peterson was that he was a dude who hated trans kids and liked to record his own lectures and put them on YouTube. Like that was that's all I knew about Jordan Peterson.
Canada. Many of you watching this will be familiar with the events that transpired in consequence.
Okay, I can't believe you're doubling down and you're not going to ever take this back. Like, this is the problem with pseudo-intellectuals, by the way, who are unable to have any kind of self-awareness and reflect upon, wow, I lied. I lied a lot, and I lied with intent. And I'd just like to come out now and say, I was lying, I'm sorry. That was bad of me. That would be nice. It's never going to happen, but that would certainly be some progress, I would say, at the very least. You know what was really fucked up? I don't know, okay, so I've said this before. I used to read a lot of the Four Horsemen of the Cringe Apocalypse. I'm talking about the atheist crew. I loved Christopher Hitchens. He was like one of my favorite writers. I've read almost everything he's ever written. I've really liked Richard Dawkins. I'd read a whole bunch of his books, which actually taught me a lot about evolutionary biology, all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, blah, blah, more. Never liked Sam Harris. I was always like, Sam Harris, bit of a cunt, you know? He's just bit of a smug cunt. That's what I always thought about him. I was like, he's the least interesting of the four of them. He contributes the least, and just there's something off about him. I can't quite place it, but like, sure, I'll read Letter to a Christian Nation, and it's okay. It's passable. It's fine. You've got some okay, but it's really short too. It's not a lot to consume. But when Jordan Peterson goes on his podcast. And that was my first, in my life, introduction to Jordan Peterson. I'd never heard of him before. This was the first time I ever heard of it. And he gets on that podcast, and the first thing he starts talking about is like, thank you for agreeing to be on this with me today, Jordan. I was hoping that we could explore what you certainly described as an attack on free speech and compelled speech in the world, really. And I'd like to know your opinion on that. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is interesting. There's an attack on free speech in Canada. What is going on here? Oh, yeah, they're making us say Z and Zer. You can't believe they're putting people in jail for neo-pronouns. The Marxists have arrived. And I was like, wait, what the fuck? What? This is a guess that you think is appropriate? So and immediately I was like, oh, I have to learn more about this. What is this Bill C-16 he's speaking so highly above? It had nothing to do with what he was saying out loud. And Sam Harris bought it all. these apparently, like, you know, the atheists, they are like the intellectual superpowers that are unable to be fooled by like the modern conventions that plague society. And he was just sitting there listening to everything, being like, so they will actually fire academics for using Z and Zer, and you know, this is certainly a form of compelled speech. I mean, I don't want to invoke a certain book, the only book that I know certain people may have only read, but I do want to say that it is kind of like a certain figure who was in a certain war. I don't want to invoke that one war and that one figure, but I am saying that this is very interesting that they're doing this in this country. Just believe the whole thing. Like, no critical faculties, no double check, no double think. He didn't do anything. He just sat back there and bought the entire fucking lie. So anyway, sorry, I know this is a long ramble, but maybe this goes back to why Jordan Peterson is now going to do the same thing to Bill 67, which I am going to look up, by the way.
Fortunately, I feel compelled to do something similar today in a variety of different ways in relationship to another bill, a provincial one this time, Bill 67, which purports to address racist issues in the entire Ontario education system. I'm going to read something that I wrote about this as a...
Okay, let's get all Canadian-like in this one. There's a number of amendments that are made into the Education Act. So this relates to the Education Act. Amendments to the Higher Education Quality Control of Ontario in 2005 include 2 new subsections, which provide at least one member of the council shall be a person who has expertise in racial equity in post-education sector, and that all members must have proven commitments to racial equity and to take anti-racism training. Doesn't seem very, very controversial yet. Okay. Section 6 of the Act is amendment to add racial equity-related requirements to the functions of the council. The Ministry of Training. Ooh, this one sounds kind of 1984-ish. Colleges and Universities Act is amendment to add a new section, 17.1, which sets out anti-racism and racial equity requirements that apply to every college of applied arts and technology and every university that receives ongoing operational funds from the government for the purposes of post-secondary education. Subsection 18.1 of the Ontario College of Teachers Act, 1996, is amended by adding the requirement that the person successfully completes and prescribes examinations and training in anti-racism in order to be issued a certificate of qualification and registration. Again, not like, is it the anti-racism thing that's kind of spoopy? Because does anti-racism mean anti-white to you? Because that's, you know, there's white people who aren't racist who are trying to fight against white, like, supremacy. Anyways, amendments to the Ontario College of Applied Arts and Technology includes adding anti-racist education and training, reasonable, education and training related activities of a college may undertake in carrying out its new objects. 5.1 sets out that each college or subsidiary of a college shall develop and implement anti-racism policies. Reasonable. Amendments that are also made, like, you know, racism's still a thing, right? Like, it didn't go away. The whole Obama got elected racism, that's a meme. So this isn't in any way, this not only is this not unreasonable, it kind of feels like overdue, also doesn't feel very scary. Anyways, Anti-Racism Act 2017 is amendment to add anti-Asian racism. Does that one scare you? Are you like, what, postmodern neo-Marxist Asians? To the examples of types of systemic racism referred to in the Act. Bill 67, 2021, the Act has amended various acts with respect to racial equity. So they're going to amend it by adding anti-racism means the policy of opposing racism, including anti-Indigenous racism, anti-Black racism, anti-Asian racism, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia. What's wrong with any of that? Like, unless, like, the only reason this should scare you is if you were really hoping to engage in some pretty hardcore racism. Because, yeah, you might be compelled to learn in a training course that that's not such a great idea. But, I mean, if you were like, I just couldn't wait to say the N-word all day. Well, yeah, you might learn in the classroom why that's deeply offensive for a white person to say. That could be it. Racism means the use of the socially constructed ideas of race to justify or support, whether consciously or subconsciously, the notion that one race is superior to another. How is that controversial in any way? Jordan, I say this as a white person, or sorry, I should say white passant. We have to be very, very specific about our term. No, I say this as a white-skinned person. This is not offensive at all. Race is not real, and the idea that there are A, races, and B, that they are inferior or superior to one another is utterly absurd and fucked up and should be called out and should be taught. Like, people should learn that. It'd be great if everybody knew that. The same as anti-racism training. It addresses racism to promote racial equity. Also not that controversial. Professional development programs, anti-racism protocols. Racist disturbances. Every person who disrupts or attempts to disrupt the proceedings of a school or class through the use of racist language or by engaging in racist activities is guilty of an offense and on conviction of a liable fine of more than $200. Ooh, maybe this is the one. Maybe this is it. So like, this is like a new rule, I guess. Or no, sorry, this is just an amendment to something that already exists. Subsection 264(1) is amended by adding the following clause to advance racial equity. And anti-racism, adding the clause to advance. It's just adding this one clause. It's just the language. Yes, this is already a thing. Sorry, I'm strawmanning. I haven't even watched the video yet. I'm really strawmanning them here. I'm very curious what it's going to be. Promoting racial equity. Okay, so honestly, the only reason I think all of this would disturb you, and the only way it could, is if you're really, really intending to do some racist shit in the future. And even then, it's kind of like there's already safeguards in place for you not to do that racist shit. Like, you can't just barge into a classroom and be like, N-word, 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 they're all N-word. You can't do that. You will be like, you know, there will be repercussions for your for your actions. But they've added new language here, which is the word racial equity into the terminology. They want input, they want a review, the implementation of the ministers, the information to the minister, the number of times support services, complaints, resolutions, and accommodations related to racism are requested, made and obtained by students enrolled at the faculty, college, any anti-racism initiatives or programs established by the college or university to promote awareness of the supports and services students, faculty, and staff, number of incidents and complaints of racism reported by the students. This is all about transparency and the implementation. You want transparency. You want them to have to report on that kind of stuff. They want to have to do annual reports to the Board of Governors. College universities take reasonable steps to ensure the information provided to the minister as the board of governors is pursuant to the subsection, protection of their privacy, safety regulations, all pretty standard boilerplate red tape stuff. Okay, so here's yet some new potential additions. Anti-racism means the policy of opposing racism, including anti-indigenous racism, anti-black racism, anti-Asian racism, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia. Racism, the use of socially constructed ideas of race to justify support with the consciously Europe. Okay, so anyways, we've ran through the whole thing. You now all know what you all know what Bill, sorry, I'm talking too much like Jordan Peterson. You all know what Bill 67 is trying to do. In my opinion, completely reasonable. Absolutely 100% reasonable. None of this, and like, I'm sorry, unless your idea is like, the only way I can see you being in opposition to saying, like, adding these very, very minute little additions to an already existing set of rules is if you genuinely, like, find opposition to the statement. Racism, that means the use of socially constructed ideas of race to justify or support, whether consciously or subconsciously, the notion that one race is superior to another. Racism. All right, so let's see what Jordan has to say about this.
Warning. A warning to citizens of Ontario and Canada. Bill 67, which purports to be nothing but an anti-racist bill, is in fact the most pernicious and dangerous piece of legislation that any Canadian government has attempted to put forward.
Are you fucking me? Do you know what the Indian Act of Canada is, Jordan Peterson? Holy fuck, that's still the law of the land. Like, we have codified in our constitution that Indigenous people are a form of property. What are you talking about? This is the most insidious bill in Canadian history. Without a hint of sarcasm. Like, holy shit.
And I hope I'm not saying that lightly.
You certainly aren't. Holy fuck. What a fucking man-child.
It will make mandatory the subversion of the entire education system in Ontario, K-12, as well as colleges and universities,
no, it won't.
to the radically leftist doctrines known as critical theory.
Oh, I was waiting for this, honestly, because, like, y'all have had so much success in the United States turning CRT into a fucking, key issue that I was like, when is it going to happen in Canada? It's only a matter of time, you know? If we just give it a little bit of time, and hey, lo and behold, a savior comes from on high here to tell you all, like, holy shit.
Early anti-Western ideology, both postmodern and Marxist in its...
I'm gonna all of them. Just easy is all the classics. Just throw them all, wrap them all around. I contend, Mr. Peterson, you have not read this bill. I genuinely contend that, because again, there is not a huge amount of amendments, and they are not controversial, and they are not even that offensive. To word this whole thing the way you're doing, Utterly absurd. Completely absurd.
Derivation based on the idea that all our extant institutions are racist, sexist, and discriminatory.
Holy shit. Holy shit. You know the fucked up thing about things like, sociology and the findings therein, especially by prominent sociologists? It's like, it's not telling you, I don't see why you take so much offense to this, Jordan. It's not like, Jordan Peterson, you and every white person is innately a racist. You were born a racist and you will always be a racist. So says the CRT. The way you've kind of framed this whole thing, it's kind of like, hey, so yeah, we've made some observations in the way society is structured. Turns out that race is a social construct and that there are forms of privilege that certain people have as a result of having race. It's not all the time, and there are different vectors in which people can be oppressed, of course. People can be oppressed for their class. White people can be oppressed for being poor. White people can be oppressed for being gay. White people can be oppressed for being trans. But there's also a difference between the experience of a white person and the oppression they feel as to, say, an indigenous person who is, again, an indigenous person can be oppressed for being gay. An indigenous person can be oppressed for being trans. They can also be oppressed for being indigenous because of these artificial constructs that we've set up that aren't real. These are the observations we've made. We have seen and observed these things. This is just the way that society is structured. It's not you racist, you white people. Every one of you white people, I tell you, you don't know, do ya? Time is racist, okay? Clouds are racist. The color purple is racist. It's all racist. That's what the CRT is trying to tell you. That's what they're trying to put into your minds.
In their essence, critical theorists assume that history is best understood as the war between identity groups, with one group always oppressing and all other groups always victimized and exploited.
Victim culture.
Critical theorists dismiss the idea of the sovereign, free individual, claiming that belief in such sovereignty and freedom does nothing but justify the oppression and exploitation of the marginalized.
I told you, communism, it's one big communal massage. That's what we're going for. Gonna get the whole world massaging each other. Yep. And if you think that's just a weird thing to say right now, well, he's saying some weird shit too, okay? The words coming out of his mouth don't make any sense either. So we can both be. It's a gibberish hour. We're trying to out-gibberish one another right now.
In keeping with that rejection, such theorists assume that human identity itself is best understood at the group level, with markers of race, sex.
Nintendo, when you believe that your heritage is your greatest source of pride, which is common amongst conservatives, criticizing the past of society feels personal, I suppose. But it's just like, the reason why CRT has become a wedge issue in the United States is because they're lying to people and it works. And that's why this is probably going to work here too, right? I can see a whole bunch of people now getting outraged, being like, oh, wow, Bill 67 is actually about teaching people that white people are inherently racist. Sorry, we can't say white people. Judeo-Christian Western culture is inherently racist. And we won't stand for that. No, we're not teaching our kids this.
So-called gender and sexual preference dominating. Critical theorists reject the...
Wait, gender and sexual preference? Have you been talking to James Lindsay? I feel like I'm listening to James Lindsay right now. This feels like James Lindsay has the remarkable ability to ingest a whole bunch of information and then regurgitate absolutely nothing of meaning or substance from it. But he learns a lot of words, and then he'll throw all those words into what seems to be a very scary statement. Because you'll sit there and he'll be like, well, Marxists and neo-Marxists as well as other leftists and communists are trying to impose through critical race theory a standardized set of values, controls, measures, because they are virtue signaling and they are honestly concerned primarily with oppression culture and hierarchies of oppression, and they want to make everyone the same, and that's why I'm a big boy. I'm a big boy now. There you go. Lots of things from a sentence.
Presumption of individual innocence, absent proof of wrongdoing. Assuming that membership in a group regarded as dominant and exploitative is sufficient to indicate the moral culpability of any given member of that group.
Read the bill.
Critical theorists define offense and harm as subjectively determined. Anyone who feels victimized by any statement made by anyone for any reason is fully justified in their feeling and claim of harm, regardless of the intent of the author of the statement, who is then to be deemed guilty of such victimization and denied even the opportunity for a reasonable defense. Bill 67 will mandate the creation of institutions of inquisition in every educational institution.
Oh God, it's the Inquisition. It's happening all again. But this time, they're coming after the racists. No, the Spaniards are here. Run!
To which anyone who has
By the way, Bill 67 is already law. These are amendments to Bill 67 that he's really freaked out about.
Opinion or undertakes an action that is perceived to violate the tenet.
Why is he doing this? Well, first off, it's deeply offensive to him. The very idea that people might get some kind of racial equity training in the workplace or racial equity training in a school setting before people become, teachers. That's beyond the pale. He feels like this is the Spanish Inquisition all over again. He is being tortured. He can't stand for it. This is the cat o' nine tails just raining itself on the back of his fucking skull.
Of critical theory will be made necessarily subject to punishment. The author of this bill, MPP Laura May Lindo, NDP, Kitchener Centre, is former head of equity at Laurier University. It was Laura May Lindo who developed the policies that resulted in the circumstances that enveloped Lindsay Shepherd in 2017.
One of your
produced a
most
scandal
prized
provincially,
possessions.
nationally, and internationally, left a permanent stain on Canadian universities, on the reputation of Canadian universities, and demolished that young woman's academic ambitions. And
but she became a conservative YouTuber and a conservative Twitter account for a while until she flew a little too close to the sun and got her account deleted. But she did become a conservative YouTuber. You helped that one.
Future. The fact that the Ontario Conservative government has allowed and even encouraged such legislation to be put forward under their aegis and then ignorant and careless enough to vote in support of it.
Okay, so he hasn't been too, emotional during this, and it's only during the emotions that you really start to hear the Kermit. So right there, you can see things are starting to get a little loose, starting to finally get a little passion, and that's why they're careless and just, gotta calm down.
Is a woeful indication of both the perniciousness and deviance of the ideas that the legislation contains, and evidence of their own,
the
Conservatives' own stunning and continued inability to see the danger such doctrines present. It is much harder to actually deal with the fact of the sometimes unjust distribution of privileges and resources in a complex society than to kowtow to radicals who know how to viciously accuse, weaponize guilt, and claim through.
That's the fucked up thing about all this. Again, it's observations. It's if someone's like, hey, by the way, this is the way this thing operates in society. We've observed this. Here are our findings. And you're like, this is postmodern. You want us to kowtow to your desires, you Marxists. Evil Marxists, get away from me. They're in the room.
Manipulative sloganeering the moral upper hand. But there's no excuse for the conservatives and for the classical
this looks like a supervillain
who also
monologue.
believe in the sovereignty of the individual to trust.
Hold on. Let's put on, let's say, Marvel villain music. This is Hydra's theme. Very appropriate.
Their compassion for the oppressed by allowing authoritarian ideologues to gain their treacherous way. This bill, 67, threatens the integrity of all the systems that will educate all the young people in Ontario for decades to come. If it passes, the rest of the provinces in Canada will follow suit. The fact that this bill is already through second reading is inexcusable. Wake up, Canadians, before you do yourself and your children irreparable harm.
Why did you leave that in? I really thought he was going to be like, Hail Hydra! The time has come, my lobsters! Rise! Rise! Like the crustaceans you are! Daddy beckons you! The time is nigh! Wow. Thanks for that little bit of humor, Jordan. I really hope this bill passes, and then this just became a funny crusade that you lose, and everyone mocks you for it. And yeah, hilarious.
Do you enjoy the Serfs, but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Just, we beseech thee to smite down our enemies. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your humble court jesters, here to amuse you. To our lords, Trevor R., we give thanks for this spit of land for us to eke out this meager existence. To our knights, Merid, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Ellie Leslie, Alex P., Brandon, Words Greenwood, Nate, that one guy, Hagbird Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Daniel Sutton, Coulter Smith, Val 9000, Jenna Tall, Quiet 185, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, The Tim Caucus, Multimondi, Trevor Yanis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophojack, Saren 42, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Nkosin, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Josh Mickelson, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We raise our flag in a veil, and we salute you, our friends.